Next, we have Sonal Shaw, founder, Sonal Shaw Event Consultants. Sonia is the owner and operator of Sonal Shaw Events based in New York City. She has organized over 1,300 weddings around the world and has been featured in numerous national and local publications such as the New York Times and the Washington Post. So this morning we really have an international group of panelists with us. And the first question is going to be for Sonal and Therese, and it is what not to say to a South Asian.
Good morning, everybody. I think for us, it's really, for South Asian weddings, it's not what not to say, but really understanding that with our weddings, you're really dealing with multiple family members and multiple decision makers. So I think one thing not to say is I only work with the bride, because that's not really the case with the weddings that we plan. And so there's a lot of decision makers that you have to work with and address and understand all of their needs and concerns.
And this is a good one. Which country you face the most restrictions for ceremonies? Sonia, do you want to?
Sure. I don't think that it's a particular country for me. I think it's an area, the Caribbean. I mean, we do a lot of South Asian weddings, and the biggest problem that we face is the number of guests that we have. So a lot of destination weddings right now, they don't have the capacity for, let's say, 600, 700, 800 people. And when we're doing weddings in the Caribbean, that's definitely a challenge. They might have the beach space or the outside space, but they don't have an indoor wedding backup that could hold that many people. And that's one point that I wanted to bring up. Is even in speaking to a lot of venues yesterday, one of the biggest concerns that I have is, you have indoor space that might be for a couple of hundred people, but for the South Asian market, that's a rarity that we have weddings that are 100 or 200 people. This past weekend, I did a wedding for 950 guests. So I think that for the Caribbean, for us, it's very hard to find venues that are large enough, and then they also have indoor backup spaces. And then the other main issue that we face is the food. So obviously with South Asian weddings, they want Indian food. And a lot of the venues that we go to, they have their set standard menu that they would present to any client. But with South Asian weddings, I mean, the menus span 4 or 5 pages sometimes. Like a cocktail hour could have anywhere between 65 to 70 appetizers that are being butler passed. So I think that venues need to be very cognizant of the fact that they have to have very elaborate menus in place when you're trying to land a South Asian client. And especially for the reception, it's not like your standard 3-course meal and you're done with these selections. A lot of the menus that we put together for the dinner receptions for us have 6 stations, 9 stations with food from all over the world. So you have to kind of be prepared for that, and we find a challenge in the Caribbean because venues are not used to holding this many guests, as well as having menus that are set in place that serve the South Asian market.
Sonia, did you want to?
Sure. For me, my top 5 tips, especially for South Asian weddings, is what I touched on before. Just make sure that you have menus that are in place for an Indian wedding that are very, very elaborate, food from all over the world that could be represented at a wedding. A lot of times I go to venues, or they come to us and they say they want to be able to do Indian weddings, and we get them the job, so to speak. We book the venue, and then they say, well, we don't allow a fire. We cannot have a fire inside of our venue, which is very interesting because that's one of the biggest portions of our weddings, is to have the holy fire. A lot of times when we do weddings, I'll ask the venue for either a horse or an elephant or some mode of transport for the groom's procession called a barat. And they're not really prepared for that question, which I find very interesting because that's a huge portion of the start of our ceremony is the groom's procession. Last year I did a wedding in Dubai, and I asked the venue, it would be really interesting if the groom came in on a camel, and they're like, oh, well, we can't get you a camel. I'm like, well, it's Dubai. I'm pretty sure we could find a camel someplace for the groom. So be prepared for that. And then, as Teresa mentioned, a Ganesh statue for our ceremonies is very important. A lot of venues, a lot of countries that I go to, they don't have one available, especially if they're in the Caribbean. So that, especially for the decorators, if you're a decorator that wants to get into doing Indian weddings, that would be one main important thing, is to find a Ganesh statue. And my last point is just mainly keeping the family happy. It is about the bride, but it is more about the families and making sure that you connect with them and keep them happy throughout the process. They don't like to hear no to anything, so you have to really be prepared to figure out alternative solutions and say yes.
Do you ever suggest that the couple visits the destination prior to actually choosing that particular location for their wedding?
I mean, for us, yeah, absolutely. It's an investment of their time, of course, but it's well worth it because you can't pick something online sometimes. No matter how many videos or things that you see, I always encourage my couples to go there, especially even if all the negotiations are done and they're only going there to sign the contract. I mean, for me, a lot of our clients that are based in New York, they want to do destination, and a lot of destinations have already been done now with the South Asian community. So we're looking to do, more private islands, complete buyouts of luxury resorts. That's like the next level of where our clients are going, because they don't want to be at a venue with other people. They don't want to share event spaces with other event companies that are there. So I think for us, that's like the challenge for us, is finding bigger and better spaces and bigger and better venues that they can do a complete buyout. Private islands are amazing because at some point there's no restrictions, there's no noise ordinance, there's no, it's not the same as working in any other city. So that's like the next step for us.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much. What an interesting panel and great questions and answers. Thank you.